All right, ladies and gentlemen, now that the Buffalo Bills season is officially over, it is time to start focusing more on this shortened season that the Buffalo Sabres have. The Buffalo Sabres, coming into this year, looked on paper to be a lot better, in my opinion, than they were last year. Now, there were still some things that people wanted addressed. But we'll talk about that. So we're going to do a Sabres progress report. We're 8 games into the Sabres season right now, at the time of this video. And through 8 games, the Sabres sit 3-3-2. They are on pace for 56 points and have gotten points in 6. They have gotten 6 of the last 8 points available to them. They sit in 5th place in the East Conference. As you know, they shuffled the conferences and made them more geographical if you watched the last video. The Sabres sit in 5th place. Just 1 point out of being in that last and final playoff spot. The top 4 teams from each division will make it into this year's NHL playoffs. The Sabres sit just 1 point out of those playoffs. They sit just 5 points out of first place overall. And now in a shortened season, if you go on a run in the NHL, you could either distance yourself from the rest of everyone else, or you can make up a lot of traction. You play each team in this conference 8 times. The Sabres are going to play each of these teams 8 times. And usually it's back-to-back. Not like a game yesterday, game today, but like back-to-back games. The Sabres' last 2 games were against the New York Rangers. The Sabres this year, it just feels different. Maybe it's just me, but they just feel different. They don't feel like the same old Sabres. They feel like they have an opportunity to win every single night. Like, that's how I feel about this team. I feel like when I watch them, like I almost expect them to win. In years past, that's not necessarily been the case. Not for the last couple of years anyway. I feel like this team could win any single game, and when they get down in a game, I don't think to myself, well, that's the end of this one. They have been playing, through the first 8 games, very good hockey. All the numbers, if you're an analytics nerd, all of the numbers point to the Sabres playing a very good brand of hockey. I'm more of an eye test kind of guy. They look pretty good in most of the games. Thursday night's game, that was the exception. They looked like dog shit. They got beat from start to finish by the New York Rangers, but guess what? They still stole a point out of that game. They got outshot an insane amount. I think through 2 periods, the Sabres had 9 shots on goal, but the Rangers only led 2-1. The Sabres got a goal in the 3rd period, took it to overtime, and then a bad giveaway by Eichel, and it ends up in the back of the net. One of the question marks coming in was Linus Omark, and he played stellar, but we're going to get into him in a little bit. With more veteran leadership, it just seems like this team doesn't get rattled quite as easily as it did in years past. You have guys like Stahl and Hall that have come in, that have been in the league for a very long time, and they're able to settle some of the younger kids down, whether it be Rasmus Dahlin, whether it be Dylan Cousins. You know, they seem to settle these kids down a little bit and help them kind of get over some of the mistakes they may or may not make during the game. The Sabres this year, their penalty or their power play has been absolutely lights out. Has been lights out. Over 30% for the year so far in the first 8 games. I think they've scored power play goals in like the last 4 or 5 games. And they have 2 legitimate lines on the power play now. They don't just have one top-heavy, loaded power play unit where the second power play unit is just a bunch of scrubs mixed with Jeff Skinner. They have 2 legitimate power play lines now that are both dangerous and both can score, and that has done tremendous things for the Buffalo Sabres. If you take a penalty against the Buffalo Sabres, you could be in trouble. However, on the flip side of that, if the Sabres take a penalty, they're still going to be in trouble. One of the things that they brought guys like Eichel and Ryder in here for is the penalty kill. Unfortunately, through the first 8 games, it has not looked that good. They are still under 80%, and they're still in the bottom third of teams in the NHL in terms of penalty killing. So the Sabres definitely need to pick that up if they are going to be successful this year. Now let's talk about through the first 8 games. I had very high expectations for a lot of these players in 56 games, especially with the additions of Hall. With the addition of Hall, I had high expectations for Eichel. I thought he would take his game to another level. Through the first 8 games, Jack Eichel had been a little bit snake-bitten in terms of goals. He hadn't been scoring a lot of goals. He's been getting the opportunities. He just hasn't been burying them. The last 2 games, Eichel has 2 goals in the last 2 games. He sits through 8 games, 2 goals, 7 assists, 9 points. Victor Olofsson continues to show that last year was not a fluke and that he is a legitimate top 6 player. He has 3 goals, 4 assists, 7 points. Taylor Hall went on a bit of a skid there after 6 points in his first 3 games. He now had a point in this last game against the New York Rangers. He has a goal, 6 assists for 7 points. And Sam Reinhart being elevated back to that top line. Eichel, Reinhart, and Hall, barring this past game where they switched Hall and Olofsson, they look dominant. Hall, Eichel, and Reinhart look like a very, very dangerous top line when they are all playing when they're all playing at the highest level. This past game was not a game where they all played at the highest level against the Rangers, and yet they still all came out of there with a point. Reinhart had 2, Eichel had a goal, and Hall had an assist. They are all very, very good players, and they are a very dangerous top line. Put them up against any top line in the NHL, and they are right there with any of them, in my opinion. The bad news is they still have Jeff Skinner buried on that 4th line. Ralph Krueger still has him buried on that 4th line, and that is making a lot of people upset. It's made me upset, but the thing about that is Jeff Skinner, even though he has 1 point in 8 games, which is an assist, he has been getting chances. He has been getting grade A chances. Obviously, he's not getting the ice time that you would get with an Eichel or even a Stahl, but he is getting chances playing with Curtis Lazar. Curtis Lazar is a former first-round pick, so he's not playing with a bum. Curtis Lazar does have skill. Curtis Lazar actually has 2 goals and an assist for 3 points in 8 games. The only thing is, you're paying the guy $9 million a year to do the one thing that he is really good at, which is score goals, especially 5-on-5, which is something the Sabres are struggling doing. It's almost counterproductive. Dylan Cousins looks like every bit of a top 6 forward that everyone thought he would be. I had reservations coming into the season, and so far, Cousins has proved me very wrong. I had reservations thinking maybe this is going to be another Casey Middlestat situation where maybe he needs another year of development. Middlestat should realistically have played all year last year in the AHL and then maybe competed for a spot this year. But Cousins looks every bit of a top 6 forward that the Sabres drafted in the top 10. He has been very, very good. Now we talked about before where I said Omark looks every bit of number 1. He does. Omark in his game so far this year, the Sabres didn't upgrade goaltending, but Omark, I thought he had a really strong year last year, a bit inconsistent at times, but I really thought that he had the potential to be a solid number 1 goalie. I'm not going to sit here and tell you he is an all-star, that he's going to just play lights out Andre Vasilevsky type goalie, but I do believe that he is a solid starting goaltender, and the Sabres can make it to the playoffs with him as the starter. And last night, this last game against the Rangers, it showed. He played lights out, and he stole a point for the Buffalo Sabres. So far in this season, Omark in 5 games is 2-1-2 with a 2.51 goals against and a .915 save percentage. That is up from last year again. And he continues to grow and build. He is still a young guy. I feel like people were just giving up on Omark and not remembering that goalies take a little bit longer. Goalies actually seem to hit their prime right around 27, 28, and they play well into their 30s. Linus Omark, well, again, I'm not going to sit here and beat the drum for him, beat the table for him and say, make him your all-star number 1 goalie. I'm going to say he is a very solid, competent starter. The question marks on this Sabres team are a couple. I think the defense has actually played really well. A lot of people have complaints about it. They have some hit or miss games, of course, but overall, I thought I believe they have played pretty decent. 5-on-5 scoring is an issue. Again, you have your best 5-on-5 scorer on the 4th line. That's not helping anybody. The Sabres continue to seem to struggle to score 5-on-5. A lot of their goals are coming via the power play, which has been completely unstoppable lately. But the biggest problem, I think, on this team is going to be the backup goaltender, and that is Carter Hutton. Now, they had an opportunity to get a couple of other guys. Carter Hutton is making a lot of money, so I don't think that they just wanted to dump him. This is his last year on the contract. And I think that they wanted to see if Hutz maybe with some better eyes. He had LASIK surgery in the offseason. Maybe could see the puck more. Maybe he would play better. That's not the case so far. Carter Hutton in 3 games is 1-2 with a goals against of a .266 and a save percentage of a .899. That is the troubling statistic right there, the .899. You want Carter Hutton to realistically, I want him to realistically be .905 to a .91. And I think that would give the Sabres enough saves to win a handful more games. And that is the difference between making the playoffs and not making the playoffs this year. Overall, the Buffalo Sabres, they have been playing well. They haven't always gotten the results at 3-3-2. But I think that as the season goes on, the fact that they're in every game, the fact that they're right there, the fact that they look good in most games, even though some of these guys were snake-bitten and not scoring goals, I think the Sabres are building towards something, and I think that they could go on a little bit of a run here. And I really, really hope that is the case, because I don't want the Sabres to set the NHL record for most seasons without making playoffs consecutively. But that's going to do it for this episode of Sports Talk Buffalo. Remember, if you like what you're hearing, tell your friends, tell your family. They can hear me on any of the major podcasting websites, including Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, and of course, Anchor. They can hit me up on Twitter at Sports Talk Buff1. That's Sports Talk BUFF1 on Twitter. They can email me at sportstalkbuffalo@yahoo.com or sportstalkbuffalo@gmail.com. Let me know how you're feeling. If you have any topics you want me to talk about, anything like that. That's going to do it for this episode. Thank you guys for listening. Have a fantastic week.